In December 2005, the beachside town of Cronulla became subjective to violent riots following the assault of 2 Australian lifesavers by a group of Middle Eastern boys. The assault of the 2 iconic Australian lifeguards provoked immediate backlash from the Australian public. However, it is reported that the tension had been building for months, as gangs of Lebanese swarmed onto Sydney's Cronulla beach, annoying the elderly, abusing Australian families, and threatening to rape Australian women for wearing bikinis. They did not come to enjoy the beach and in the Australian tradition. They came to flout their disrespect for Australian culture and for the Australian law. Following the assault of the 2 lifesavers, plans were put in place for a protest as a means for Australians to reclaim the beach. Whilst the initial intention of the event was set up as a protest, it turned into what could only be described as a riot. The day of the protest saw approximately 5,000 people of Anglo-Celtic background gather in the streets of Cronulla in order to stand up for the Australian way. Some of the rioters wore Australian flags draped over their shoulders, others wearing proudly Australian hats, in a bid to distinguish dominance and a way of portraying what they felt was the typical Australian. Violence broke out due to a combination of mob mentality and alcohol, and many ethnic individuals were attacked and assaulted. Signs and t-shirts read discriminatories such as "Love it or leave it," "Wog free zone," and "We grew here, you flew here." The following night saw incidents of retaliation by those of Middle Eastern descent. They used acts of violence and vandalism, including the burning of vehicles. Police locked down areas of Sydney, including Western Sydney, guarding those who were to enter and leave, and searched cars and checked identification for those entering particular areas to avoid occurrence of further incidents. The fight divided many of Sydney and called for Australians in general to address their notion of the identity of Australians, or more specifically, what is it to be an Australian? What may have originated from a few youths of Lebanese descent displaying disrespect and bad behaviour on the beaches of Cronulla turned into an attack on a whole culture, religion and a way of life, on Muslims in general, regardless of whether the Lebanese youth disturbing the beaches were indeed Muslims. At this point, any Australian involved in the riot saw anyone of Muslim or Middle Eastern descent as being different. They were outsiders, making them different, although for some, they had been born in Cronulla or had lived there for most of their life. Haig writes that dominant group members of a nation have an image of what that space ought to look like in terms of who gets to occupy that space and under what conditions. As such, notions of undesirability rather than inferiority become important. Whilst a dominant group may not necessarily consider a certain racial group to be inferior, they may nevertheless consider them to be undesirable and therefore not wanting them to accompany their space, unless perhaps it is under certain terms. The fact that the riots happened in Cronulla may have been as simple as the access to the area. It is the only beach with a train line, therefore allowing residents of Western Sydney, many from different racial backgrounds, to visit Cronulla. In summer, Cronulla Beach is reported to be one of the most ethnically diverse beaches in Australia. The riots significantly impact on the diversity and culture of this area. Prior to the riots, there was a uniqueness and unlike elements to the beach. The sport that was played, the clothes people wore, all contributed greatly to the diversity. There wasn't much diversity in the summer of 2005. If you didn't fit into a particular group, it was likely that you would be attacked or injured. Still not recovered from the turmoil and chaos that shook Sydney during December of 2005. We need to address the need to educate and teach Australian youth, as well as the older generation, that is not a matter of tolerance which we need to overcome, but acceptance and respect. For the second part of the assignment, we've been asked to review how we would introduce the information that we had on the social media into a classroom environment. The first thing that I have done is look at the website that has the KLAs and essential learnings on it, and I've looked at what essential learnings of studies of society and environment I would like to introduce to Year 7. So when I look at the ways of working, I want to reflect on and identify different perspectives, recognise and clarify beliefs and values relating to social justice, the democratic process, sustainability and peace. In this lesson, students will be asked to understand themselves more fully as members of different groups. They'll be interacting with members of other groups within a national society. It is also essential for students to gain an understanding of what the term culture refers to, how people come to acquire different cultural identities, and how interaction between culturally different people can be improved. Outcomes of the lessons. Okay, what we would like to achieve is that by the end of the lesson, each student will understand difference and diversity. They will be able to know how they feel about differences and identify the similarities and difference among a member of group of students. Alright, so what we're going to do for an introduction is play an introduction to the Cronulla riots to the class. So this will actually just be a 2-minute video just displaying to them what actually happened during that time. So they obviously can get a conceptual understanding and a visual idea of what actually took place during the riots. What we will do is have a group discussion, and the teacher will introduce by saying that diversity, that there are many ways to define diversity. We're going to be focusing on different activities in this lesson, and it's important to consider all characteristics, external and internal, that make us individuals. When thinking about diversity, most people think about external characteristics such as race and gender. The invisible characteristics, however, such as intellectual ability, social class, languages spoken at home, etc., equally contribute to the diversity of our classroom. Differences. As with diversity, there are many ways to define differences. We each have what we feel is a certain norm, and people outside of this are different from us. Differences do not have to be a negative thing. That can be something that we embrace and that we like about somebody else. Okay, what we need to do now is discuss as a group what diverse characteristics and differences were evident at the Cronulla riots. Why do we think that this happened? What were the main differences between the two cultures? Discuss if it's fair that a whole community was attacked when it was only a handful of thugs that had created the problem. The teacher will promote and prompt students to think further by encouraging any responses that they give, and I guess also looking at ways to make the actual topic more in depth. Following the discussion, we'll introduce playing a game. The game is actually going to be called Claim It, and what it's going to do is it's going to encourage all students to claim many parts of their own identity. It will also allow them to observe and respect many parts of other people's identity. It's important to explain to students that we'll be moving around a lot during this activity, and that obviously we should respect a lot of people. Not only is it important though that obviously we're going to be moving around, it's going to be a game that also requires silence so that we can observe what's going on and how we feel, and then there'll be lots of time afterwards for discussions. During the game, the teacher, i.e. myself, will name a category and ask students to move depending on whether or not they can claim that category. So what they'll be essentially doing is revealing a part of themselves. After the game, we're going to discuss what we've learnt and how the game made us feel. Before the game starts though, we really need to set up ground rules to make sure that everybody feels safe about moving around the room, and more importantly revealing information about himself or herself. Some of the ground rules for making this place feel safe both physically and emotionally could be discussed and encouraged with the students. So let's ask the students how they feel that this is going to be able to work for us. Depending on what answers the students give, write them on the board, so at any time if anybody is deviating from the rules in the future of the game, we can potentially point them back and say, these are rules that we made up together as a class and we need to respect those rules. I guess the things I would be expecting to see is, watch where you are going, don't touch other people while you're moving, don't make comments about how people, what people have claimed and as part of their identity. Follow the rules, be quiet during the game, be open to other people's differences. Confidentiality, let's not do any gossip on what we share here in this room where we all respect each other. Listen to others' ideas during the post-game discussion. Alright, so explaining the rules. During this game, we're all going to stand together at one side of the room. I'm going to read out a statement and you can claim it by crossing to the other side of the room if it's true for you. For example, I might say, if you are a girl, claim it. All the girls in the room would cross to the other side of the room and then turn around to face those that did not claim that identity. Silently observe who has claimed this identity, who has not, and how this makes you feel. I will then ask you to rejoin the group. Okay, now if you belong to a certain group but you don't want to claim it publicly, then don't. This is an entirely voluntary exercise during which you get to decide what term means to you and whether or not you want to claim it. If you choose not to claim the group in which you belong, notice how that makes you feel. That being said, you might want to take some risks today so that we as a community can get to know each other better and continue to create an environment in a classroom that welcomes that. Okay, alright, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to start. So if you are a girl, if you are a student, it's important that we notice who is standing with us, notice who is not, and think about how this makes you feel. If you were born in Australia, you're a member of a sport or club at a school, you have one or more siblings, you are Asian, Eastern Asian, South Asian, Indian or Pacific Islander, you are a boy, you speak a language other than English at home, you can speak another language, you already know what you are doing this weekend, you're European, American or white, you live with only one parent, your favourite subject is English, you have a pet at home, you do well in maths. Okay, I guess that would conclude like the different group that we have. Now what we're going to do is come back together. I'm going to ask students to get into a group of 4 which I nominate, and we're going to actually choose from one statement below and discuss with the group how this particular statement what you learnt from the activity in relation to this particular statement. So students are encouraged to choose one of the following 7 statements. How did you feel when you had to claim a group and walk to the other side of the room? How did you feel when you were in a group that didn't move? What surprised you about what you have in common with others and how you differ from others? Where you hesitated to claim any group, don't say which one, but maybe just discuss why. Were there any groups that you wish you could claim, that you were glad that you didn't have to claim, and why? What did you learn about others in class from doing this activity? And more importantly, what did you learn about yourself? Should we change anything about how we interact with each other based on seeing the diversity in the classroom? And I think it's important that everybody gets together and discusses the element that they have chose as a group, and then what we're going to do is ask them just to present that information to the classroom. That hopefully in doing that we'll be looking at this whole respect thing, accepting diversity, accepting differences, and again not have anybody judge people based on what they're actually exposing about themselves. Just as a conclusion to the lesson, we did see many differences and similarities within our group today. We want to ask the students to take out their books and write about differences and diversities that they saw themselves in the room. How did the Cronulla riots make them feel, and how as an individual they would embrace differences and diversity moving forward. I think